We're living in an era when scarcity continues to aggravate all over the world. Global food supplies are at alarmingly low levels, while prices keep reaching new highs with each passing month. Extreme weather events and ravaging natural disasters have been affecting food production all across the planet. And the health crisis has undoubtedly pushed global supply chains over the edge. The situation is incredibly chaotic right now, and every time the supply chain crisis seems to be easing, a new disruption emerges to take things back to square one. As a consequence, the United Nations is warning that the world is currently battling the worst hunger crisis in this century, and conditions are expected to get even worse in 2022. Earlier this month, a group of 120 non-governmental organizations has joined forces to publish an open letter urging global leaders to act and halt the devastating food crisis the world is facing. A new study found that the number of people likely to face starvation in 2022 could jump by 17%. The Global Humanitarian Overview 2022, released by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, is warning that an additional 274 million people are likely to face hunger next year. This is up from the 235 million people increase recorded in 2020 and 168 million in 2019. In total, over 700 million people are facing extreme food insecurity all over the globe. Unfortunately, this tragic crisis is far from ending. For a very long time, experts and economists have been sounding the alarm about global trends that indicated we were heading towards a terrifying global famine. And this is where we are now. That's why we have been relentlessly stressing the importance of getting prepared for the challenges ahead and sharing the insights of experts that know the food industry from within. Apparently, the Chinese government is already aware that we're on the verge of a massive food crisis, and they can see what is coming next. China has always been very concerned about preparing in advance for potential adversities. For that reason, officials have decided that now is the time to hoard food, energy supplies, and other commodities. In fact, a recent article published by Nikkei Asia revealed that the Chinese government is hoarding food on an unprecedented scale. All over the country, government officials are issuing stockpiling orders for grains and other food supplies. Actually, the report highlights that the nation that is home to less than 20% of the world's population has managed to hoard more than half of the globe's maize and other grains, which is triggering sharp food price hikes across the entire planet and pushing more countries into famine. If we have nothing to worry about, why would China be doing this? The truth is that they know that famine is on the way, and the Chinese government is already taking precautionary measures. The Chinese are known for planning for multiple years ahead, since the country has been plagued by a series of disasters and weather events in the past. This has probably led officials to expect a troublesome period of food shortages, given that the nation has struggled with drought, floods, and pests that have caused widespread crop failures over the last 2 years. On top of that, more than 20 months of persistent supply chain disruptions and La Niña weather patterns have also resulted in volatile conditions for food production. But the one thing Beijing cannot play with is discontent among its citizens, sparked by food shortages and skyrocketing prices. That's the very reason that led central planners to spend $98.1 billion in food imports in 2020, an increase of 4.6 times from a decade earlier, according to the General Administration of Customs of China. From January to August this year, China has imported more food than in the entire year of 2016. Over the past 5 years, China's soybean, maize, and wheat imports soared 2 to 12-fold on aggressive purchases from the US, Brazil, and other supplier nations. Imports of beef, pork, dairy, and fruit jumped 2 to 5-fold, Nikkei Asia reported. And the amount of food they're stockpiling right now is simply staggering. New data released by the U.S. Department of Agriculture exposed that China is about to have 69% of the globe's maize reserves by the end of the first half of crop year 2022, as well as 60% of its rice and 51% of its wheat. If things spiral out of control in 2022 or beyond, the Chinese government will have enough food supplies in their reserves for the entire population. Some reserves can last for over 18 months, according to Qin Yuan, the head of grain reserves at the National Food and Strategic Reserves Administration. China is maintaining its food stockpiles at a historically high level, he said. Our wheat stockpiles can meet the demand for 1.5 years. Even though the Chinese state media downplayed the idea that the country is preparing for a food crisis at the beginning of the year, President Xi Jinping warned state officials that food supply and prices should be kept in order to ensure national food security at all costs. As Nikkei Asia pointed out, throughout history, food shortages have triggered popular unrest. They served as a contributing factor to uprisings that toppled Chinese dynasties, and the world's second-largest economy now faces food uncertainties due to factors such as its deteriorating relations with the United States and Australia, which could drastically alter the import environment. Meanwhile, here in America, our government is taking a completely different approach. If China is feverishly stockpiling food, we probably are doing the same thing too, right? Wrong. Once again, our leaders are failing to assess the severity of the problem. In the past, we did have programs in which the U.S. government stockpiled significant amounts of food to ensure supplies in times of crisis, but all of those programs have been terminated in recent years. In the late 1970s and 1980s, the Department of Agriculture would buy the surplus of dairy products produced by the country's small farmers to help them cope with lower prices and then distribute these supplies through a number of welfare programs directed to low-income families. However, our current strategy is to let agricultural surpluses perish and go to waste, not to disrupt trade flows and prices in the global market, which is as insane as it sounds. The U.S. government could be managing our domestic food supplies in a much more effective way, but they don't believe that we will ever come to the point of needing food reserves to ensure food security in our country. Today, all we have are some seeds, a limited amount of food, water, generators, and other commodities purchased for aid programs that are widely scattered across several distribution centers around the country. We are terribly unprepared for a widespread food shortage in case a disaster hits America. If we face a major national emergency and the government is forced to send those limited food and water supplies to aid the victims, our stockpiles will be gone almost immediately. And once they're gone, the rest of us are gonna be on our own. That's why we should start building our own reserves while we still can, because it's safe to say that our leaders are not gonna help us get out of a crisis like this. At this point, we can already see that food prices continue to climb higher with each passing day. Food inflation is a serious issue affecting millions of Americans. Over 24 million households reported facing food insecurity this year as prices rose to the highest level in decades. According to a United Nations report, global food prices soared more than 30% over the past 20 months, the highest ever recorded in nearly 4 decades. The increase was partly driven by strong demand and worse than expected harvests. The FAO Food Price Index, which tracks monthly changes across a range of food commodities, has shown that the price of wheat, a commodity grown on more land area than any other commercial crop, jumped by 5% last month because of poor harvests from major exporters, including Canada, Russia, and the United States. Barley, rice, and maize prices also surged, while the price of palm, soy, sunflower, and rapeseed oils led to a 9.6% increase in the FAO Vegetable Price Index. As global food supplies get tighter and tighter, and production collapses due to supply chain problems and climate change, we have seen supermarkets and grocery stores all around the world struggling to keep their shelves fully stocked throughout this entire year. In November, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce ordered local authorities to stockpile food to ensure that their citizens have an adequate supply of essentials this winter. That has sparked a massive panic-buying frenzy with the public and has led prices to escalate very rapidly. In the U.S., rising food commodity prices and higher costs for labor has led major food companies to pass along price increases to consumers. Unilever, Kraft Heinz, and Mondelez have all significantly raised prices on popular products. As we approach 2022, food prices are expected to go even higher, and millions more Americans will suffer from food insecurity. But our leaders keep telling us not to worry, because the Western elites have the perfect solution. As Zero Hedge analysts noted, the establishment is trying to make bugs a popular alternative to combat rising food costs. So, without a doubt, Beijing has been stockpiling food to avoid a collapse, as central bankers have yet to figure out how to print food from thin air. But don't worry, as the global food situation worsens, we're all likely to be forced to eat crickets, worms, and grasshoppers, they wrote. Can you imagine having to resort to insects to have enough to feed your family? That's a solution they're trying to implement in Europe right now, and that soon may be introduced in our supermarkets too. It's one thing to try a crunchy grasshopper to have some sort of gastronomic experience, but having to downgrade the quality and the nutritional value of your food because you lost the ability to afford the supplies you used to consume, it's a very different thing. You should start preparing accordingly, because if there's one thing we all learned with the emergence of the health crisis, is that our supply chains are extremely vulnerable, and once shortages start to occur, they only will become more and more widespread. Don't be caught off guard when hunger crises start to erupt all over the world. The Chinese government is already working hard to prepare for that time, while the U.S. government is letting our economic conditions go from bad to worse. So, if you're hoping our leaders will come to our rescue when things go downhill, you are gonna be bitterly disappointed. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, we would like to recommend 7-Year Apocalypse, the latest book from the economic and financial analyst and expert Michael Snyder. Don't forget to turn notifications on to keep tuned to our next videos.